When you hear the word safety, what do you think of first? If you're a parent, you might think of your kids. If you work at the NHTSA, you might think of seatbelts or highway design. If you're a cop, safety might mean protecting the public from crime. But if you're an average American worker, somehow the word safety often elicits a sense of annoyance. A sense of, sure, everyone should work in a place free from hazards that may harm their health and wellness. But it's that but that's always kind of baffled me as a safety professional. In other videos, I've focused on some of the ways that employers fail when it comes to safety, and in this video, I will be trying to shed some light on some of the challenges EHS concepts face from those that they're meant to protect, and try to understand the dichotomy of we should all be safe while we work, but the orange vest, the hard hat, or the toolbox talk at the beginning of a shift is kind of worthless. A video recently popped up in this channel's feed that really began to clarify some of the causative factors that lead not only to apathy when it comes to safety, but some outright disdain. This video will examine portions of Safety Culture is Ruining Construction by Carl Morawski on YouTube. There's a link to the full video in the description, and I encourage you to check it out. He does make a lot of good points, even if I may not agree with a lot of them. So let's take a look at it through the eyes of a safety professional and see if it is safety culture that's actually ruining construction.
Safety culture has ruined construction. Now, don't get me wrong here, okay? I want everybody to go home to their family, to their dog, to their Star Wars toy collection, whatever it is. I want people to work safe and go home safe. But safety culture on the job site has gotten way out of control.
I can understand this statement to a degree, but I would be interested to know how much time is being wasted on safety throughout a typical workday. In my experience, it's really not that much and can often be measured in minutes, and it can seem sometimes that people spend more time trying to avoid safety than they are forced to endure it.
What began as workplace safety enforced by OSHA has become like performative safety theater that just kills morale.
I will submit that working on a job or in a company where someone just lost their eyesight, a limb, or died is a lot worse for morale.
And the worst part is, it's really not even about keeping workers safe. It's about money. I mean, shocker, I know.
I'll be diving deeper into this as the video goes on, but the grim reality is that the only thing that moves companies in any industry or on any topic is the money.
Nice truck, boss. If you work hard, do overtime, and come in on weekends, next year, I'll buy myself an even better one. There's
certainly a philosophical debate that can be had on this topic, but it's the reality that workplace safety lives in, so yeah. This is why OSHA can be so important. Historically, worker safety was so far down the list of things employers cared about that it basically didn't exist at all. In the decades leading up to 1970, spearheaded in large part by labor unions, the political climate forced decision makers in many arenas into the passing of the OSH Act and the creation of OSHA to enforce that act. Now, I'm not saying everything changed overnight or that every change was good change, but for the purposes of this discussion, prior to that, it was not uncommon to find yourself unemployed after you got hurt on the job, even if due to spectacularly unsafe conditions. Fast forward from 1970, and not only are there direct financial incentives tied to compliance with OSHA regulations, but factors external to regulations now put financial pressure on employers to keep their people safe. It would be nice if employers made safety a priority simply because it was the right thing to do, but we live in reality.
There's actually a term for all the binders, the worksheets, the weird safety rituals that you have to go through. It's called safety clutter. This is the accumulation of paperwork and activities that may look good on paper, but they don't actually contribute to a safer work environment at all.
Now, I've created and implemented some safety clutter, and in a well-crafted and implemented safety program, what appears on the face of it to be clutter can be an effort to gather leading data. As an example, I've managed programs that include worksheets that ask employees periodically to perform basic, standardized assessments of safety throughout their work area. While this may have seemed repetitive and remedial, the goal of the completion and submission of these worksheets was twofold. First, First, to get workers proactively assessing the safety of their work areas in ways that I just couldn't. Second, to collate the information reported into data points that can show leading indicators of overall safety performance, not just the lagging indicator of near misses, accidents, injuries, and illnesses. I'll go into some of the challenges that safety programs face as they justify their existence and expenditure as we move forward with this video, but I'll preface that by saying, without supporting data, safety is just theater.
This whole dog and pony show makes workers cynical. You know, we go to the orientation, we sign the paper, we slap the sticker on our hard hat, all so we could just get to work and get paid. That's what we're there for. Nobody wants to get hurt or cause an unsafe situation, but we've all heard these things time and time again so often that it basically becomes background noise.
Later in his video, he goes into some of the dynamics of how workers' compensation, insurance, mod rates, TRIR, and other metrics drive workplace safety. But that topic deserves its own video. For now, though, be glad they do. For the vast majority of human history, the primary ways projects were managed was to simply throw bodies at it and hope that they didn't run out. With the pin in that for now, though, I can understand how safety can seem repetitive, particularly in the construction industry. Year over year, it remains one of the most statistically dangerous class of work sites with one of the highest injury and fatality rates, not only in the United States, but around the world. So the emphasis placed on the safety of construction sites when determining, managing, and mitigating risk is considerable, compounded by the fact that these sites are extremely dynamic in the types of risks they present, and that an individual worker may be on a few different sites in a year means that there will be repetition and the individual may get swept up in some seemingly irrelevant topics as employers manage their safety programs. What it isn't, though, is entirely irrelevant. Employers aren't in the habit of slowing down productivity without reason. So if you're
getting a toolbox talk about chainsaw safety in a building as an electrician,
then there is probably a reason, even if it's not presented very clearly. Even with all that said, though, if the goal is to simply just get paid, safety orientation, refresher training, toolbox talks, and all of the other safety clutter that seems to cause so much ire is paid just the same.
Worse yet is that most messages of safety are delivered by some fresh-faced youngster who, beneath a pristine white hard hat and clean vest, is telling you to put on your safety glasses for the third time. I have my own issues with safety officers, all right?
The ire here is something that I've run into a lot, and it's not just levied against the fresh-faced. I'll say it, because it's what it feels like. Professional safety and environmental health is a skilled, educated profession, just like being a plumber or an electrician. And just as there are some that may think that they can wire up an electrical service panel safely because they have a basic understanding of how a circuit works, there are some that think that safety is just a bunch of common sense when there's a lot more to it. I've said it before, and I'm just going to keep saying it. EHS is so much more than hard hats and safety glasses. It's about air quality, chemical reactivity, physics, accident reconstruction, policy writing, risk management, fiscal responsibility, education, and a litany of others that makes EHS rather unique. It's one of the few practical professions where expectations often surpass what could reasonably be achieved. If you're an EHS professional and you're talking to a plumber, you're expected to be an expert at plumbing, or you're invalidated. If you're talking to a carpenter, you're expected to be an expert at carpentry, or you're invalidated. If you're talking to an owner, you're expected to be an expert at running a business, or you're invalidated. Generally, we're not experts in any of these things, but while we should be working on ways to improve safety, we're often forced to simply keep pointing out where it's being circumvented or outright discarded. Personally, I could care less if an individual wears their safety glasses when they've been prescribed to protect against real, practical, and observed hazards. Each individual has the right to be literally blinded by their own arrogance if they so choose, but unless they're self-employed and working on property that they own, it doesn't affect them alone. The reality is, just as the employer is required to provide a safe workplace, workers are required to follow safe work practices, even if they don't personally agree with them.
You know, we're living in a society.
Additionally, when writing safety programs or policies, they must identify who it applies to and how. At its most basic, the affected and effected. In an environment with a wide mix of types of work being completed, that will include many people who are only tangentially related to that policy and those hazards. HAZCOM programs provide a good example of this in action. Let's say there's a building that's first floor is a dry cleaning business with the second, third, and fourth floors comprising office space. No one would deny that the workers at the dry cleaners, the affected, need to be fully trained on the chemicals they'll be using and how to protect themselves against the hazards they present. What's a bit underappreciated is that everyone on the upper floors, the affected, are part of that same program, and there are a litany of circumstances that could compromise their health and safety that they must be made aware of. This paradigm should be part of any safety program, but, unless properly explained, may leave the affected scratching their heads.
Now, I've said this before, but it certainly bears repeating. Some of the smartest men and women that I've ever met in my entire life have been dirty, rotten construction workers, blue-collar people whose wits are razor sharp and they really do live by them. They're usually very astute, very perceptive, especially when it comes to telling when something or someone is completely full of shit. And when it comes to safety, they know right off the bat, I have to go through these motions so I can get back to work.
This is precisely where safety goes off the rails and becomes antagonistic, competitive, and counterproductive from both sides. Sure, some EHS professionals are assholes.
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
Hell, I'm positive I've been one at one time or another to some people.
Yo!
And it was probably a justified assessment. We are all humans. That having been said, though, the seemingly automatic assumption that safety is
Completely full of shit.
starts the whole relationship between workers and safety professionals off on the wrong foot. This is a thing that needs to change. Safety professionals deal with this from all sides, and it's an attitude that I have had a hard time understanding, especially from workers. Safety programs are nerfed by employers from their inception in many cases, making so much of what has become monikered as safety culture seem so disingenuous as it's implemented, even if the safety officer isn't. This is a hard pill to swallow, but everyone is forced to work within the limits an organization will allow, and it's especially difficult when you're dealing with people's lives. What's an even harder pill to swallow is resistance from the people these policies and programs are meant to protect. I'm reminded of a walkthrough of a carpentry shop with an insurance adjuster at a previous employer. A career carpenter ripped a board on a table saw, and when he was finished, the adjuster asked if a push stick had ever been considered in place of bare hands. The response was, "I've never needed one before." This is a perfectly valid choice that might be fine when at home in a garage, and maybe this individual really is just that good that they'll never have an accident. But this was the example being set for the shop. About a year later, another carpenter, this time one just out of journeymanship, was performing basically the same task when the blade hit an unseen knot in the wood, causing the board to be pulled towards the blade along with the bare hands holding it, causing a severe laceration to the palm and severing tendons. Now, there are some that might say that this individual just wasn't cut out for the job or wasn't careful enough, or joke, well, they won't do that again. What I say is that the culture in that shop discouraged the use of a simple safety device that would have made this just an accident that, at worst, maybe broke a table saw, ruined a piece of wood, instead of potentially ending someone's livelihood. Was making that cut that critical that a few seconds couldn't be taken out to find a safer way to do it? Of course it wasn't. But that's not why a push stick wasn't used. A push stick wasn't used because people that used push sticks were ridiculed. I think if there was a core idea that I could probably put into one sentence about safety culture, it would be this. Property is replaceable. People aren't.
Morale really suffers when crews are forced through safety performances and these things that don't actually have an effect on their day-to-day. Now, if we're doing a critical pick, or we're going to work on some live stuff, or maybe hot work, something where there's an actual danger that is clear and present, I'm all ears. How can we all stay safe? But box checking and going through things that just don't apply and just having to listen to somebody and your eyes are glazing over, those are the kind of things that kill morale.
Believe it or not, it's not the big and obvious that usually gets you. It's the seemingly small and insignificant that ruins backs, ruins eyesight, makes people sick, or it's that one time you stretch your luck just a little bit too far to get the job done that has the biggest impact on the vast majority of workers. Safety isn't only about whether you live or die. It's also, or in some ways mostly, about being able to pick up your kids without pain, have a healthy retirement in 30 years, and be there for your grandkids at their high school graduation. I would challenge anyone that has a problem with safety officers in general to take a moment to honestly think about why. I would, though, also challenge any safety professionals to think a bit about how they approach things. Safety is about trust. Some of my greatest allies in safety have been the people who gave me the most grief up front. It takes time. Time to explain why something is necessary and how it helps. Time to listen to the people that are out there doing it every day. Time to show what your goal is as a safety professional to gain that trust. Safety because I say so fails safety. That being true, it's very difficult for a lot of safety programs to justify the expenditure of time, especially on things like training, safety committee meetings, and activities for which simple metrics are difficult to quantify. If a particular topic or subject seems like it really doesn't matter or apply, the fact that it's being covered was probably a hard-fought case behind the scenes with real practical arguments for why it was necessary. Sure, some topics are mandated by regulation or by insurance requirements or because the message just simply hasn't been absorbed, but even then it can still be challenging to get any real enthusiasm for the time that it takes for safety. One of the hardest things to do in safety is tracking and demonstrating value or return on investment to the organization with the purse strings. Arguably, success in safety can only truly be tracked by accounting for things that haven't happened, and it can be very hard to prove a negative. The manifestation of this, at least in my experience, is that there are times when safety is merely reactionary. For instance, say there's a random month on a site where minor lacerations spike, so the following 2 weeks is just filled with as much laceration prevention and first aid training as can be mustered. This is only part of that response. The other side of this coin often goes without notice as EHS professionals and others try to determine what the causal factors of that spike might be. Most of the time, it's not just employee carelessness. And to return to a previous point, in a well-run program, a lot of that safety clutter helps to avoid reactionary responses by scraping together useful leading data to make educated predictions of hazards where they may not be apparent. Closely managing that data does affect the day-to-day safety of workers. When this video popped up on the channel's feed, I was hooked by the title because it's difficult sometimes to get a good understanding of why EHS professionals might be having such a hard time affecting practical change and building a true safety culture. And it gave form to a kind of an amorphous feeling that I've felt at least throughout my career as a safety professional. I'm going to play about 2 minutes near the end of his video uncut and uninterrupted, not to pad the runtime of my video, but he does offer solutions, and I think they're insightful ones.
Now, I don't like giving problems without proposing a solution, and I think that there is a way to do safety properly. First, they gotta cut the clutter. The clutter is just way too much. I don't need to know about a chemical that can burn me that is actually 500 miles away and will never be on this job site. There's no purpose. Second, they have to shift the metrics to what actually matters. TRIR that debate's over. It's a useless metric. Focus on the things that are immediate hazards that actually affect the people in the job that they're doing. And I get that they have to keep the legally required stuff. There's a certain amount of compliance that I'm sure you just have to do. But anything outside of that should really just be applicable to the job and keeping the worker safe, not performative. And then they have to reframe the PTPs and toolbox talks, not as a worksheet that everybody has to fill out and then sign at the end, because I've given these talks before, and I've seen the guys' eyes glaze over as they just wait for me to stop making noise so that they can go to work. The better way, in my opinion, is to open it up and have a conversation about it, because if the guy working next to you has a story about why you should do a particular thing so you don't get hurt, that's gonna land a lot harder than just reading it off a worksheet. Look, a lot of us are in construction because we didn't like schoolwork. Please, don't give me another worksheet to fill out. And finally, more companies have to take morale seriously and treat it almost like a safety metric. Because if morale is low, maybe it's not the worker's fault, maybe it's management's. Too much safety crap leads to exhaustion and indifference, but a supervisor who actually listens to you, adapts plans based on different information, and actually proposes good ideas to keep yourself safe rather than just going through the motions and box checking, that improves morale because you know that the guy who's watching over you actually has your best interest in mind, not just he's done all of his paperwork for the day.
That's exactly what safety culture is supposed to be. Safety culture or culture of safety have become popular buzz phrases over the past few decades, but I think have lost their meaning or been distorted from their original concept. Now, I don't want to draw too many parallels between law enforcement and safety because they really are two completely different animals altogether. But with respect to safety culture, I'm reminded a bit of community policing. Community policing spawned from a genuinely good idea as a way to reinforce the relationship between the public and its police force, with the goal of more effectively investigating crimes and increasing overall community safety and security. But as the term was increasingly applied to policies further and further away from its original intent, it became distorted. I think something very similar has been happening with safety culture, as that term has been applied to a lot of things that stray a bit from the original intent or half-heartedly implement what it's meant to foster. And what it's meant to foster is safety as second nature. An environment where safety is as part of an organization as lunch breaks and paychecks, and where you don't have to overly think or overly plan for it, it just naturally occurs. But implementation is everything, and it hasn't really been all that long that safety has been a priority in the workplace. I think it prudent to be reminded of a forgotten truth about workplace safety. It took a literal act of Congress to start making real change for workers. I'm going to say that again. It took a literal act of Congress to start making real change for workers. Now, the OSH Act isn't particularly the subject of this video, but it was written in the blood of the average worker. Oceans of it. Almost in spite of that, some industries, businesses, and even individual workers put more effort, time, and money into circumventing safety regulations and best practices than it would have taken to heed the lessons of the past, all in search of and in protection of the dollar. Safety theater, or as I have characterized it before, the illusion of safety, is very real, and it's something that any real safety professional fights against every day. Not generally for themselves. Their hard hats and vests are usually pretty clean, but for the workers in their own little slice of heaven. When safety culture is broadly painted with the brush of being
completely full of shit,
especially by workers, it only helps to reinforce the adversarial relationship with safety, and it's something that just makes no sense to me. My first safety director sold the job to me with a statement that has only become more true the longer I've done it. Safety is the hardest, easy job you'll ever do. It seems like such a simple thing from the outside. Just keep people safe. Workers should be on board with you. The company should be on board with you because it's in everybody's best interest to, on the side of the worker, not be injured, maimed, or killed. And on the side of the company, their insurance costs go down, they don't have people missing work, and they can remain productive and profitable. But somehow that's just not the case. If you look at job boards advertising for safety positions, you'll see the same positions at the same locations popping up year over year or within 2 years, some even within a few months. Most safety professionals will never be millionaires, but they will all burn out. It will burn out often. The unfortunate reality is that safety is caught in the middle of two opposing worlds, and only one of those worlds keeps them employed. Every safety program is only as good as the organization allows it to be. And it's too often only moved forward by one of two things. The first is the small incremental changes that will be accepted by the organization and tolerated by the workers that do lead to a safer workplace, but unfortunately has no large impact. The second is catastrophe. Catastrophe that ruins or ends the lives not generally of the executives or the managers, but of the workers. So if you're asked to take 10 minutes out of the beginning of a day for a toolbox talk about machine guarding, or an hour a year for a lockout tagout refresher, or you're asked to participate in a safety committee meeting, try and be happy about it even if it's not your cup of tea. There was a time not all that long ago when your safety wasn't discussed at all. So now I'm forced to answer the question, is workplace safety culture ruining workplace safety? I'll answer it with something that all EHS professionals say eventually and probably often throughout their career. It depends. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you liked the video, drop a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm very interested to see what your thoughts are on this subject, no matter where your opinions lie. If we are really committed to making safer work environments for everybody, we need to talk about it. And in my experience, one of the hardest things it is to get people to talk about in most of the workplaces that I've been a part of is safety.